You built a bridge on my land, and you think I'm the problem. That's what I yelled barefoot in the mud as the HOA president Karen stood there with her ribbon-cutting scissors and a lawsuit in her purse. You want to know how a community footbridge turned into a federal court battle? How one man's quiet lakefront dream became ground zero for HOA? Madness, sabotage, and poetic justice? You're in the right place. This is HOA Karen Files, where entitled power trips meet their match. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next outrageous twist in America's most dramatic homeowner showdowns. The flashlight beam hit me square in the eyes. Sir, you're in violation of HOA bylaws regarding appropriate lake access hours. The guard barked, puffing up his chest like he had real authority. I was waist-deep in Black Heron Lake, naked at 2:14 a.m., and this guy, this overpaid weekend warrior in knockoff tactical boots, was standing on my dock, holding a clipboard like he had just stumbled onto a crime scene. My crime skinny dipping on my own damn property. I treaded water slowly, trying not to laugh, trying not to scream. I blinked through the beam of light, soaking in the absurdity. I'd bought this lakeside cabin for solitude, not for security patrols with delusions of grandeur. I own this land, I said, my voice flat. The HOA charter applies to all properties visible from the waterline, he recited. My patience cracked. Get the hell off my dock. He hesitated for half a second, then scribbled something on his notepad and retreated to his golf cart. I heard the electric whir of the tires fade into the pines. That was my first run-in with the evergreen waters. HOA. I didn't know it yet, but it was only the beginning. The real battle was still months away. I'd bought the property 3 months earlier, a 2 6-acre lot tucked into the south bend of Black Heron Lake, surrounded by hemlocks and ancient granite boulders. The cabin was nothing special: cedar, sided metal roof, 1970s solar panels that barely kept the fridge running, but to me it was paradise. No traffic, no meetings, no neighbors close enough to knock. The realtor, a chatty guy named Neil, had been clear. You're outside the HOA zone, completely independent, no dues, no restrictions. It was the final selling point. I'd fled suburbia to escape the tyranny of overregulation. No more notices about my mailbox paint, no more measuring grass height with a ruler, just birds, trees, and water. And for the first few weeks, it was perfect until Karen showed up. She arrived in a glossy black SUV that looked wildly out of place on the gravel road. I was on the porch, sanding down the front steps when she pulled up, stepped out in kitten heels and introduced herself like we were on a daytime talk show. I'm Karen Delaney, president of the Evergreen Waters HOA, she said, flashing a smile tight enough to crack glass. I'm not in the HOA, I replied, not smiling. Well, technically no, she conceded, drawing out the word like she was about to sell me a timeshare. But we consider all lakeside properties part of our greater community. It's about stewardship and aesthetics. She handed me a thick envelope of glossy papers. Membership is voluntary, for now, but compliance with shoreline ordinances is expected, for everyone's benefit. I didn't take the packet. I'm good, I said. Her smile didn't budge, but her eyes narrowed. I see you've done some deck work. You should know that exterior modifications must maintain shoreline harmony and require visual inspection approval. I'm restoring a 30-year-old deck, I said, on my own land. There are viewing angle concerns, she countered. At that moment, I realized I wasn't dealing with a neighbor. I was dealing with an empire builder. Karen didn't just want my compliance. She wanted my surrender. Over the next week, it escalated. Notices started appearing on my door. Unapproved vegetation management, unauthorized dock access modifications, excessive lumens from exterior lighting. I called the county. They confirmed what I already knew: I was outside the HOA's jurisdiction. No citations, no ordinances, no problem. I filed a cease and desist letter reviewed by my sister, who was a contract attorney in Vermont. I sent it, certified mail. I kept receipts. 3 days later, a white SUV with a security logo started doing slow laps past my property. Same guy, clipboard in hand, watching logging. Then came the garbage delays. My bin wasn't collected for 2 weeks. A delivery truck called me and said the road was no longer considered active service. Every week, some small, new inconvenience cropped up. Then came the straw that broke the damn dock. I was out kayaking one Sunday morning when I noticed survey flags staked along the shoreline. My shoreline, red markers, spray paint, strings, marking angles I hadn't authorized. I followed the line back up the slope and found two men with clipboards and digital levels standing on my patio. I climbed out of the kayak still dripping. "You're trespassing," I called out. "We're conducting a shoreline impact survey on behalf of the Evergreen Waters HOA," one of them said. "You'll need to vacate while we complete the analysis." I didn't request a survey. I said HOA initiative. "All lake properties must be assessed for erosion risk, not in the HOA," I repeated. That night I installed cameras. By the end of October, my peaceful retreat had become a fortified outpost in a suburban war zone. Cameras watched every approach. My motion sensors logged every rustle along the gravel drive. And Karen, she escalated from HOA president to full-blown war general. The next incursion wasn't just symbolic, it was a literal invasion. It started on a foggy Thursday morning just after 7 a.m. I was sipping my coffee on the deck when I heard the unmistakable grind of heavy tires on crushed rock. A flatbed truck pulled up beside the road, tailed by two smaller pickups with utility racks and fluorescent cones. Four men in reflective vests stepped out and began unloading wooden posts, orange fencing, and rebar cages. They weren't subtle. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked, walking toward them, phone recording. The oldest one squinted at a clipboard path extension. "Orders from Evergreen Waters, HOA. Installing erosion barriers, prepping the grade." I glanced at the survey tape. It crossed straight into my property. "This is private land. Get off now. We were told this was common access shoreline. It's not. I own it." He hesitated. I showed him the deed pulled up on my tablet. The lines were clear. My parcel. My dock, my buffer zone. He scratched his head. "You'll need to take it up with the HOA. We're just here to work. You're here to trespass, and I have it all on video." That night, I sent the footage to the sheriff's office, the county code enforcement, and filed a second cease and desist, this time notarized. But Karen was already a step ahead. The next HOA newsletter arrived the same day, a full-color front page featuring a headline, "Connectivity versus Contention, Bridging the Divide." Below it, an aerial map with a bright red line running right across my property labeled "Future Shared Pathway." At the bottom, a community in support of unity. I nearly choked on my coffee. I wasn't alone in the fight anymore, though. A knock at my door that evening introduced me to Raymond Bexley, an ex-county engineer who lived 5 lots down. "I've seen this playbook before," he said, stepping into my cabin. They used it on the West Point subdivision, claimed visual easements to justify infrastructure expansion. Next thing, people are paying dues they never agreed to. He opened a manila folder and slid across 3 aerial photos, each marked with property overlays and construction plans. This, he tapped the red pathway line, "isn't just about community exercise, it's about lakefront leverage." I narrowed my eyes, meaning the HOA is trying to push a full acquisition of every non-member lot within viewing distance of the lake. Once they control the shoreline, they can apply for a private recreational district. That means public funding, tax-exempt status, and development rights development. I repeated, ice in my gut, boat launches, rental docks, waterside retail. Hell, they might even float a wedding venue. Karen didn't just want my deck in compliance, she wanted my property in her pocket. Over the next 3 weeks, the conflict turned from covert to full contact. I documented everything. Workers returning at dawn to plant new erosion markers, unauthorized land surveys conducted from the water via paddleboard, a community welcome crew handing out flyers to passing kayakers, suggesting that non-cooperative owners are a threat to Lake Harmony. Then came the anonymous letters. First, a scribbled note stuffed in my mailbox, "Why are you ruining this for everyone?" Then a postcard taped to my truck windshield, "If you hate community, maybe you should move." Finally, an envelope with no return address. Inside, a single page cut from a glossy HOA newsletter and underlined in red marker, "One owner stands in the way of unity." I brought everything inside, laid it out on the dining table, and labeled it Exhibit B. This wasn't passive aggression anymore. It was calculated pressure, psychological warfare dressed in pastels and community potlucks. And I was done playing defense. By mid-November, I had a plan. Step 1, paper trail. I filed a formal complaint with the State Land Use Commission, attaching my deed to survey and time-stamped drone photos of each incursion. The packet was nearly 2 inches thick and weighed more than most HOA members' self-esteem. Step 2: exposure. I contacted Mallory Chan, a freelance journalist who'd written an expose on HOA abuses in Hillwater Springs. I showed her everything: the forced compliance letters, the bridge plans, the footage of midnight patrols on my dock. She raised one eyebrow and murmured, "Oh, this is hell with a better manicure." Her piece would run the following week in the Sunday State Features. Step 3: disruption. I erected a 6-foot sign at the end of my driveway. "Private property HOA trespassers will be prosecuted under it." A smaller one: "Smile, you're on camera." I installed 3 new floodlights and 2 more trail cams, motion triggered and streaming directly to cloud storage. And just to twist the knife, I printed 50 flyers that read, "Your HOA dues built a path to nowhere." Unauthorized construction on Parcel 9B is illegal. Ask your board where your money's going. I handed one to every resident I saw walking their dog. Karen retaliated, of course. She posted a blurry photo of me stapling flyers online, claiming I was harassing residents and creating a culture of intimidation. She called me an agitator with no respect for community values. But the tipping point came not from words, but from the rain. On November 28th, a steady storm turned the shoreline to mush, and with it came the collapse. Literally, their HOA's makeshift barrier wall, the one they'd built to reinforce the pathway grade, buckled. 6 yards of soil stakes and composite planking slumped into the lake. The entire slope shifted, and in the morning there it was, a gaping scar of mud and timber, stretching across 15 feet of my shoreline. On private property, I called the county. They sent an inspector that afternoon. His verdict: unpermitted alteration of a protected riparian buffer. That's a violation of 3 environmental statutes. I filed the 3rd cease and desist. This one came with a demand for $35,000 in shoreline remediation, and I wasn't bluffing. But Karen, she doubled down. The next day, her board filed a civil complaint claiming I was obstructing community development and willfully damaging morale. Her legal argument hinged on a shared visual aesthetic clause in the original HOA charter language, so vague it might as well have been pulled from a vision board. Her real goal: to paint me as the villain, to shift attention from the slope failure to my supposed hostility. Too bad for her, the local paper printed Mallory's article 2 days later. The headline: "When HOAs Go Rogue, a Lakefront Tale of Overreach and Erosion." The photo underneath: Karen mid-speech, mouth open, hand raised behind her, the collapsed slope. My no trespassing sign half buried in the mud like a middle finger from the earth itself. The internet did what the internet does. Within hours, the memes began. Karen tries to connect the community, accidentally connects it to a lawsuit. That's not shoreline harmony. That's shoreline homicide HOA. More like hell on arrival. The local HOA subreddit blew up, and by Monday, a surprise email landed in my inbox: "Mr. Lane, I represent 4 other non-HOA property owners on Black Heron Lake. We'd like to talk about forming a defense alliance game." I used to think legal warfare would be clean folders, hearings, suits, and countersuits. What I didn't realize is that real HOA battles are waged not in courtrooms, but in inboxes, parking lots, Facebook groups, and passive-aggressive lawn decor. Karen's next move proved that better than any lawsuit ever could. It started with a bake sale. No, seriously, the HOA newsletter announced a community unity event to raise funds for the Lake Path Restoration and Legal Defense Fund. It featured a full-color photo of Karen beaming next to a tray of lemon squares and the bold subheading, "Preserve our progress, help finish." What we started: the flyer was taped to mailboxes, slid under doors, stuffed into windshield wipers like parking tickets of righteousness. But the worst part: they held the event on my shoreline. Well, the part they claimed was theirs. I returned home from a meeting with the Black Heron Lake Owners Coalition. Yes, we named ourselves, only to find folding tables, bunting, and a half-dozen card tables spread out along the muddy slope they'd damaged, now repurposed as an open-air fundraising plaza. There were cupcakes, there were kids waving HOA-branded flags. There was even a makeshift tip jar labeled, "Help us finish the bridge to tomorrow." And there, standing at the foot of my dock like she owned it, was Karen in a wide-brimmed hat and a blue blouse that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. I approached slowly. Calm, calculated. Karen, I said, hands in pockets. You're trespassing. Again, she didn't flinch. This is a community gathering, Mr. Lane, she said. You can't gate off the lake. This slope is my land. Your event is on private property. She gave me that saccharine smile, the one that preceded every HOA newsletter, filled with veiled threats and faux cheer. I believe we have legal precedent for community access use. I raised an eyebrow, based on what the cupcakes. Her smile twitched. You're welcome to join, she offered. We're all neighbors after all. I pulled out my phone, took a photo of her, the crowd, the tables, and the legal defense jar. Then I pointed to the edge of the grass. Leave now, or the sheriff will be joining the party. She didn't respond directly, just waved at the nearby kids and shouted, Let's all thank Officer Jim for helping keep our lake safe. A man in a tan uniform, who I later learned was a retired deputy, tipped his hat and nodded toward me like I was a coyote that needed shoeing. I didn't call the sheriff, not yet. Instead, I took notes, I filmed everything, and I waited for the second act of her crusade. It came 2 days later in the form of a certified letter delivered by courier. The HOA was officially filing for prescriptive easement across my land. In layman's terms, they were arguing that because they had historically used part of my shoreline to build their bridge and host their events, they now had a legal right to continue doing so. It was absurd. Laughable even, except it wasn't, not to the county, not to the court system, and not to Karen, who'd hired a lawyer from one of the most aggressive land use firms in the region. Their letter cited decades of community shoreline access, despite the fact that my property had only been privately owned for 5 years and that none of their historical use occurred until they began trespassing. It was a strategic lie and a dangerous one, because unless I acted fast, they could legally acquire the rights to use and alter part of my land. I needed an attorney. Not just a friend of a friend, a professional, enter Dana Morell, civil litigation specialist, former environmental defense attorney, known to bulldoze through red tape with the elegance of a wrecking ball. When I showed her the prescriptive easement filing, she laughed once, sharp and short. They're trying to gaslight a county judge, she said, flipping through the papers. Classic HOA grift. But if they get a sympathetic commissioner or the judge is asleep at the wheel, yeah, this could be a problem. She leaned forward. You got documentation? I handed her a USB stick and a binder. She flipped through timestamps, drone footage, survey maps, emails, photos, incident logs, receipts. Her smile widened. Good, let's ruin them. The next month was pure legal trench warfare. Karen's HOA filed motion after motion, trying to compel access delay review and file injunctions against my counterclaims. They accused me of obstruction, harassment, and at one point, hostile landscaping. Apparently, my motion-triggered sprinklers were too aggressive for visiting volunteers. But Dana was relentless. We filed a motion to dismiss the easement claim with prejudice, meaning they could never raise it again. We attached evidence of their false statements, including old meeting recordings and community flyers, dated months before their supposed public use began. Then we filed our own lawsuit, trespassing, property damage, defamation, and best of all, environmental code violations. See, thanks to the county hydrology department and a little help from my old contractor, Buddy Blake, we uncovered 3 key facts. 1, the HOA rerouted a natural runoff channel without a permit. 2, their temporary retaining wall contained pressure-treated wood, which was illegal within 20 feet of a protected waterline. 3, they'd failed to submit any erosion mitigation plan required for all lakeside construction projects over 10 feet wide. Karen had in effect committed an environmental crime spree in pursuit of a vanity bridge. And the county didn't like that, especially not when a local reporter started sniffing around, thanks to Dana's strategic tip. The turning point came during a public hearing. It was supposed to be a minor zoning discussion, but the county had added the HOA's project as a late agenda item. The room was packed. Karen arrived in a blazer and pearls, flanked by 3 board members and a young attorney who looked like he was auditioning for a courtroom drama. I arrived with Dana and 2 members of the Lake Owners Coalition, Raymond, and a quiet woman named Elise, who turned out to be a retired wetlands biologist. When it was our turn to speak, Dana dropped her bombshell. She presented the timeline, the service the permit violations, and the bridge collapse footage. Then Elise stepped up with a PowerPoint showing the environmental impact of the HOA's actions, complete with photos of silt runoff, disturbed nests, and invasive plant growth. The room went silent. Then Elise, bless her, ended with, "They didn't just damage land. They disrupted a legally protected biome for a sidewalk no one voted for." Karen's rebuttal was a flurry of glossy brochures, buzzwords, and attempted tears. She claimed she only wanted a better future for all of us. The board clapped, a few loyalists nodded, but then a man in the back of the room raised his hand. "I'm on parcel 8D, he said, "and I just got fined $300 for painting my shutters beige. I didn't agree to pay for a bridge. I didn't even know it was being built till I got a bill." More murmurs, another hand. "I got a warning because my kids left toys on the dock overnight, but they're out here building illegal stuff on someone else's land." The tide was turning, Karen's kingdom was cracking. The public hearing was supposed to end with a vote on zoning clarifications. It turned into a mutiny. After the first homeowner spoke up about unjust fines, more voices followed. Some hesitated, others had clearly been holding it in for a long time. "My HOA fees went up 30% this year. Nobody told us why. They're using community money to fund a lawsuit against our neighbor. How is that even allowed? Where's the budget breakdown for this bridge?" We're just supposed to trust Karen. By the end of the session, over a dozen homeowners had openly criticized the board. A petition circulated before we even left the building. And Karen, she tried to salvage it, raised her voice, talked about legacy and shared vision. But it rang hollow because now the narrative had changed. I wasn't the villain holding back progress. Karen was the autocrat spending other people's money on private vanity projects while bullying the very community she claimed to protect. The fallout came fast. Within a week, the county issued a stop work order on the bridge. A third-party inspector found structural inconsistencies on both footings. The makeshift retaining wall had already begun to crack. Moisture levels in the surrounding slope were well beyond tolerance. One good storm, and it was a matter of when not if, could cause a landslide into the lake. Karen, ever defiant, released a statement calling the findings grossly exaggerated and blamed uncooperative residents. Bad move. Because now the HOA's insurer was watching, and they didn't like liability. 3 board members resigned within 48 hours. The HOA's legal team withdrew quietly, issuing a vague statement about strategic reassessment. Karen, however, refused to back down. That's when she made the mistake that would tip everything. She filed a personal restraining order against me, claiming I was threatening her safety. Yes, seriously. According to the filing, I had menaced her with a water hose, harassed volunteers, and monitored her movements with surveillance intent. My attorney Dana could barely contain her laughter as she read it. "This is desperation in legalese," she said. "She's trying to bait you into violating something, anything, so she can flip the narrative again." Instead, we flipped the script. We filed a countersuit not just against the HOA this time, but against Karen personally. Unauthorized construction, harassment, environmental damages, defamation, filing false legal claims. The packet was 86 pages, neatly tabbed ironclad. And then we went public with Dana's help and Elise's professional contacts. We reached out to the local environmental council and a regional newspaper reporter. 2 weeks later, an article dropped with the headline, "When HOAs Go Too Far, the Battle for Black Heron Lake," complete with drone images of the illegal bridge site, side-by-side comparisons of my untouched shoreline versus the HOA's erosion nightmare, quotes from multiple residents, and a special insert. How a one-man lawsuit halted a $200,000 disaster. Karen's name was all over it, not as a visionary leader, but as the face of reckless overreach. It didn't stop there. The Lake Owners Coalition began hosting informal town hall meetings. Residents who once stayed silent came forward with their own horror stories, bogus citations, forced landscaping pressure to sell, and ignored maintenance requests. A groundswell of support formed not just against Karen, but for a full HOA leadership audit. They wanted transparency, reform accountability. Karen tried to hold her own press conference. Only 5 people showed up. 2 of them were reporters. The bridge, half finished and now surrounded by caution tape, became a literal and symbolic failure, a structure that connected nothing built on stolen trust and soggy legal ground. Karen's final move came quietly. She filed a temporary leave of absence for health reasons. The HOA board appointed an interim president, Raymond from the coalition. Dana turned to me when we heard the news and said, "This isn't over, but it's your lake now." As I stood on the dock that night, cold wind in my face, I looked over at the skeleton of the bridge they tried to force into my land. The caution tape flapped like prayer flags for failed ambition. Peace was returning, but it had a price. And I still had one more battle to fight because Karen wasn't gone. She was regrouping. She was going to take this fight somewhere worse than any court or community center. She was heading online. You know you're winning when your enemy stops using the rules and starts rewriting them. 2 weeks after Karen's mysterious health leave, things got weird. First, my name popped up on a Facebook group I'd never heard of, Protecting Willow Lake Integrity. The profile picture, a glossy stock image of a sunset pier. The description, preserving our community against hostile actors and misinformation. I wasn't mentioned directly at first, but then came the posts. Ever wonder why the bridge really collapsed? Some people just want to watch the lake burn. We'll be sharing a detailed timeline soon. Each one was accompanied by vague accusations and cherry-picked screenshots from my old emails. Some edited to look more aggressive than they were. I knew immediately who was behind it. Karen might have left the HOA, but she hadn't left the battlefield. Then came the anonymous accounts on Nextdoor Reddit, even local Craigslist. They didn't say Bennett Morris is a criminal, of course, but the tone was unmistakable. Ever wonder what kind of person installs motion-activated sprinklers aimed at people? I heard he has a criminal record from another state. Just saying. Why would someone fight so hard to keep others off a public lake? Spoiler. The lake wasn't public. I'd spent months proving it wasn't public. But logic doesn't trend online. It got worse. One morning I woke up to a Google review for my consulting business, unprofessional and aggressive. Spends more time spying on neighbors than doing work. The reviewer, Jen L. from Willow Lake. There's no Jen L. in Willow Lake. But there was a Jennifer on the HOA board. Another review followed. Then 2 more. I called my old client to reassure them, but the damage was done. "I trust you," he said, "but my partner Googled your name. This looks bad." They paused my contract. That's when I realized Karen didn't just want revenge. She wanted isolation. So I fought back, not with fire, with light. I compiled every false post, every fake review, every questionable account. I cross-referenced IP logs and posting times. Elise helped track overlapping usernames and suspicious profile images. Then I wrote a blog post, How My HOA Tried to Ruin My Life Digitally. I laid it all out. The illegal bridge, the environmental violations, the doctored emails, the fake profiles, the reviews. I added screenshots, dates, public links, even metadata. Elise shared it to her 80,000 subscriber newsletter. It went viral. Karen panicked. The next post on protecting Willow Lake integrity was frantic. "Don't believe the lies being spread by someone with an obvious vendetta." Too late. The tide had turned again. Even people who had once stayed neutral were now openly asking, why is this man being attacked online? Did the HOA authorize this? Isn't this defamation? The Lake Owners Coalition held another meeting this time about cyberbullying and digital ethics. Karen was invited to attend. She didn't show. Then the final blow landed. A local news station picked up my blog and requested an interview. I agreed with one condition: I wanted to walk them to the bridge site. So I did, camera crew in tow. I showed them. The caution tape still dangling in the wind. The crumbling concrete. The orange flags marking my original property lines. And then I stood in front of that half-dead footbridge and looked straight into the camera. "This is what happens," I said, "when power goes unchecked and the people who stand up get digitally destroyed." The report aired 2 days later. It was titled The Real Battle at Willow Lake Online: Harassment, HOA Overreach, and One Man's Fight for Truth. Karen didn't make another post. The anonymous accounts went silent. The fake reviews disappeared, likely deleted in panic. And my client, he reinstated the contract with a bonus. I'd won the digital war. But the legal one was coming next because while Karen was busy posting memes and fake quotes, we'd been working behind the scene. Not HOA meetings, actual federal court with receipts. The courthouse smelled like stale coffee floor polish and regret I was in a blazer that hadn't seen sunlight since my cousin's wedding in 2014, holding a binder so thick it could bench press itself. Elise walked beside me, calm as a monk before a thunderstorm. My lawyer, Dana, carried 2 rolling briefcases labeled Exhibits A through Hell across the aisle. Karen hair pulled tight, navy pantsuit, a Bluetooth headset that screamed CEO of nothing. Her lawyer, a slick guy named Trent, who looked like he practiced objections in the mirror, kept whispering like he was trying to calm down a ticking bomb. Spoiler, the bomb was already lit. The case was simple, at least to me. Karen and the HOA trespassed, built a bridge on my land, harassed me online, tried to ruin my business, submitted false documents to the county, and probably committed enough environmental crimes to fill an EPA bingo card. But Trent, he came out swinging. Your Honor, this is a vendetta, a personal grudge. My client simply wanted to improve her community. Dana stood up, smiled like a shark smelling blood, and said, we'd like to start by entering Exhibit A, the 3-minute drone video of the bridge collapsing on Mr. Morris's private land. The judge leaned forward. Oh, is this the one with the planter box flying into the creek? What followed was glorious. Karen's emails projected on a giant monitor reading, once it's built, he won't have a legal leg to stand on. Time-stamped footage of her trespassing. A copy of the forged map with my signature pasted on with Comic Sans font. Seriously? Audio from the HOA meeting where she said, he can't stop us if we move fast enough. The courtroom audience, mostly local residents and reporters, gasped like it was a daytime soap. Karen shifted in her seat like her pantsuit was 3 sizes too tight. Then came the counterpunch. Karen's side called me to the stand. Trent tried to play the intimidation game. Mr. Morris, did you or did you not install sprinklers aimed at community members? Yes, I replied, to water the grass. If trespassers happen to get wet, that's a weather problem, not mine. A few chuckles from the gallery. Even the judge smirked. Trent pushed harder. You removed a wedge from the bridge footing, didn't you? I shrugged. Your Honor, I never touched the structural columns. But if they were relying on a piece of pressure-treated pine to hold a bridge together, well, that's on them. Dana stood, held up the inspection reports, and here's proof it was never installed properly. Their own contractor admits it. Then came the cherry on top. Dana presented a surprise exhibit, a printout of Karen's fake HOA Facebook group traced to her IP address, where she called me a rogue eco-extremist and lakefront squatter. The judge raised an eyebrow. Miss Reynolds, did you post these? Karen stammered, I can't recall. Social media is a complicated perjury. Dana whispered loud enough for the court reporter to catch it. The verdict came fast. The judge didn't even need recess, I find, in favor of Mr. Morris. Full damages awarded. HOA is ordered to cease all enforcement actions against his property, and we are referring this matter for investigation under state environmental and civil code, Karen gasped. Her lawyer closed his briefcase like he was trying to disappear inside it. The gallery clapped. I swear, someone whispered, justice is served medium rare. 2 weeks later, the county posted a notice bridge structure unsafe, ordered removed. 3 weeks after that, I received a settlement check, $98,000. I used a fraction to reseed the creek bank and install solar-powered lights. The rest, well, I bought the vacant parcel next to Karen's. Then I put up a big handmade wooden sign, private property, all trespassers will be watered and filmed. And just beneath that, in elegant script, brought to you by the bridge that never should have been. Karen, she moved out 6 months later. Rumor is she tried to run for city council in another town. I wish them luck. And me, every morning I sit by my creek coffee and hand peace in my ears. No HOA, no bridges, no drama, just water trees and the quiet sound of karma. Flowing downstream, Karen lost the bridge, the case, and the neighborhood's respect. Me, I got my land, my peace, and one hell of a story. So next time someone tells you it's just an HOA, what could go wrong? Send them here. This is HOA Karen Files, where suburban nightmares get exposed, one insane HOA disaster at a time. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment with your HOA horror story, And don't forget, never mess with someone who reads their property lines.